Have the countdown. I love it. All right. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited to share the stage with you, Steve, today. So thank you for taking the time out of your day. So let me
Thank you for
start
inviting me.
in. Oh, it's my pleasure. Let me start in with why we are here today talking about communicating compassionate leadership and why we have you, Steve, here. So, to our listeners, let me introduce you. In more than 20 years of leading software engineering and IT teams from startup to Fortune 500, Steve Dwyer discovered that many technology leaders struggle as they advance. And one of the reasons why I'm loving sharing the platform with Steve today is this is a space that we both share, helping technology leaders advance. As their leadership challenges take a toll on the health of the teams they lead, Steve serves as a professional coach, working one-on-one with IT and software engineering leaders to help them become the people who will succeed as their scope of influence grows. Again, of all the interviews I have conducted, this one is so exciting for me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jayne Latz, also known on YouTube as the Communication Trainer. I run a communication training company for almost 18 years called Corporate Speech Solutions. And Corporate Speech Solutions specializes in developing strong communication skills, improving public speaking, and modifying accents. Our goal, like Steve, is to empower our clients to communicate confidently and effectively in any situation, whether it's giving a presentation, leading a meeting, or simply engaging in everyday communication. And we are minutes away, just a little plug for me and YouTube. We're minutes away from hitting the big 100,000 subscribers. So if you're watching from YouTube, please help us get there. Subscribe. So before we even get started, I'd love to ask you, Steve. You know that I always love this focus to be on communication, but help us all to understand what you mean when you talk about the idea of compassion when it comes to leadership.
Thanks, Jayne. When we talk about leadership, leadership implies that there's going to be a follower. And so in order for somebody to follow another person, there needs to be a level of trust. And in that context, especially in a corporate world, trust comes from a combination of competence and character. And so for character, a choice to follow somebody means believing that the other person cares about me as an individual. And that's where compassion comes in, because especially recently, there's been a lot of attention on emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace. Brené Brown, in her book, The Atlas of the Heart, she talks about how empathy, which is so important today, is one of the tools of compassion. And compassion then is that daily practice of shared humanity. It's coming alongside another person, not to fix them, but to recognize that every one of us is a combination of both strength and struggle. And recognizing that as a leader is what creates the trust that actually invites people to follow so you can be that leader.
You know, it's so funny. Our timing, and you and I scheduled this a while ago, but the timing is so perfect because the last few days, I actually just created some videos. They're not yet posted. So my followers, stay tuned on all of these topics: leadership and authenticity, leadership and not compassion. I can't even think right now of what the term was. Leadership and vulnerability, leadership and coaching. This is a whole series that I just recorded in the past few days. So this timing is so perfect because we all want to be led by people that we believe in, that we trust, that show empathy. Right now, I'm going through something. A trainer that's been working with me for 15 years, and I know him over 20, unfortunately was hospitalized last week. And, you and I, we think like everyone in our sphere, that they're going to last forever. And he's young. And I have to deal with that balance of caring. I want to check in. His sister was the one who reached out. I've never spoken to her in my life, of caring and being annoying. Like, I want to check in every single day. I want to check in, 3 times a day. He's a part of my family. He's been with me for 15 years. So yes, they know I care, but I also have to balance it because I can't check in, morning, noon, and night as much as I'd like to. So that empathy is so important. And I'd actually, maybe we'll put this at the end. I'd love to actually hear more about how you got into this from where, I just introduced you with your tech background, and here we are talking about compassion. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you came to this area of compassion in the work that you do. So I guess, tell me, what is it that makes compassion so important for you?
Well, I have lived through both sides, both effective compassion and failed compassion. When we look at some of the hot topics today of quiet quitting, great resignation, we see that these people skills that you were talking about they're becoming increasingly important for leaders to succeed. We call them the soft skills, or we've stopped calling them soft skills. They're the power skills now. I have had leaders who would, on one extreme, they just blow up and they would ridicule people in an attempt to fix others. And when that happens, it would just create that environment of fear, which suppresses any creativity. It reduces people's engagement, their intent to stay, the measurable things like employee net promoter score. It increases the cost to fill positions. But I've also seen what it's like to go to that opposite extreme and just try to be nice while avoiding any conflict and failing to invite growth. But I've also seen that compassion that is that happy medium. I've seen compassion in action in a way that extends grace for weakness, while at the same time challenging people to become that, what you described in the opener, that best version of themselves. I've also been that leader that tries to fix. I've been the leader that tries to be nice and avoids conflict. But that's why, after living through those 20 years or more in leadership roles and seeing so many people struggle, that's why now, as a professional coach, I specialize in those software engineering, the IT leaders, the person that I was, say, 10 years ago, struggling with caring for the people who worked in my department. Because as software engineers, IT, the people that you talked about that we cater to, the people skills are some of those least exercised skills often, especially for those who are new in leadership. So compassion, it's often one of the biggest areas that engineers and other technologists need to give the most attention to.
I just have to go back. I think I said this to you when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about that quote from Harvard and Stanford. Did I tell you that about soft skills? Because now I'm loving that I have to now call it power skills, because let's face it, my entire career, my whole business is built on soft skills. So if I didn't share this with you, you're going to love this. There's research from those small universities, Harvard, Stanford, and Carnegie, and it says that 85% of career success comes from, we'll call it power skills, and only 15% comes from technical knowledge.
Wow.
I love that.
I don't think I heard that one, but yes.
Isn't that amazing? So
It
for you
is.
and I, this is, the message that we give to everyone. This is, this is why when you said power skills, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to change that whole quote now. But it's still the same point. 85% of career success is working on these soft skills. And I want to just pause because I love that we're live. And I haven't said hello to the people who are tuned in. One of the things I love the most about live streaming is catching people from around the globe. I did a live stream coincidentally this morning, and that's easier to get people from around the world. But I do want to acknowledge, because someone just checked in, and please, everybody, make comments, any questions you want, put them in the comment section. But I do want to say hello to Sinan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions for Steve or I, definitely put them in the comments section, and feel free to let us know where you're calling in from, because that to me is the most exciting part of live streams. So, thank you to everybody who's watching and not commenting, because I know there's many of you as well. So back to you, Steve. It sounds like you believe, and this is such a trite way of saying it, that just being nice isn't good enough. And, I want to pause there for a minute, because we're talking about compassion in a very ugly world right now. It's a very ugly world. And why am I saying that? People who are listening may resent me for that, but I'll give you an example why I say that. This Sunday, Monday was a religious holiday. And many people were in synagogue, and one of my cousins' synagogue had to be evacuated because there was a bomb threat. It is really a very ugly world right now. So I think your focus on compassion is more important than ever. So let's talk about what makes it so important for those leaders to deliberately communicate compassion. And maybe if you could spread that word more, we would have less of those horrific threats and bomb scares.
Right. And when we hear about those, sometimes when we think we care, when we think we're compassionate, and we want to say, well, I'm not that, we do tend to go to that other extreme and just be nice. And we do like to just keep our mouth shut. But that's not compassion either.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I talked about earlier, the one on the one side just really trying to force and fix other people, or just going the other extreme. But I quoted Brene Brown earlier, talking about compassion. But in her book, Dare to Lead, she said, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And part of that shared human experience that we have, especially in a work environment, and that's where our focus is. We're less influential necessarily on the world stage, to be able to address things like synagogue threats and things like that. But in that workplace experience, part of that shared human experience is that feeling of not knowing what your leaders expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an area where clarity is kindness as a leader. It is a way of showing compassion. It is that, most especially, the consistency between what you say you expect and how you hold people accountable. And sometimes that holding people accountable and having that expectation is in the way that we expect people to treat other people, the respect that we expect people to show others, that does reflect what you were talking about, with the diversity of people's religious views, all the different, I won't begin to list all of the different kinds of diversity that respect is important to, and being able to describe what's expected and being consistent in how we hold people accountable, that is a form of compassion. And if a leader is not proactively taking steps to demonstrate with clarity that they understand and relate to those shared experiences of the people that they follow, then any kind of emotional connection that they may personally feel as a leader doesn't really do that other person any good. And that's why compassion is a daily practice. It demands action to have an impact that invites people to follow that person as a leader.
I love what you said about, it's all about what I certainly talk about, and I love it. And of course, Brene Brown says it right. Clear is kind. It's so important to be clear in one's communicating. And, I have a few virtual assistants. And whenever I take them on, I always say, please always ask for clarity, because when I get an idea, I might send an email, but I may not be as clear as I should be. So I started off by saying, please make sure, my door is open. If I'm sending you something and it's not clear, please, ask those questions, because I know I'm not always clear in my direction. I know that to be true. So, and how do you, to me, I don't know if 10 years ago you needed to talk about compassion so much.
Mm.
I don't know if you can address, how that's changed in the workplace. I think what you just talked about with, diversity, that's the positive. We are more open-minded and compassionate, but in some ways, less so as well, maybe as leaders. Can you address any like changes, that you've seen in the workplace regarding compassion in maybe the last 5 years?
I would say, just from my own observations, what I've seen is that there has been more attention drawn to the need for compassion. I know that I'm not the same person that I was 10, 20 years ago. I know that my interest in showing compassion in a way that actually communicates compassion is much stronger now than it was then. I don't know that I would say that I've seen less compassion. I think
Good.
there's just been more of an awareness
Mm-hmm.
of where I would say what's probably been more true is that the people who have needed compassion the most have now been given more of a voice.
Well
And
said.
in the past, they have, maybe it has been true and they have felt it true, that they needed to just be nice
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and just, okay, I'm not going to make waves because it's not going to work out well for me. And I think that may be what's changing, that those who need compassion most are getting the recognition um, for that importance.
Yeah. Yes. Again, I like that, more awareness. If a leader is trying, I mean, we give them credit for trying, but they're not doing it very well.
Mm.
what might some common failures look like when it comes to communicating compassion as a leader?
Um, and this draws me back to the illustration, or not really an illustration, but your scenario that you're facing right now, because this is where compassion failures often happen. I'm feeling compassionate, but I'm not sure how to express it. And it's often when somebody is struggling. And
Mhm.
I'm going to go reference Brene Brown again. She's written so many things around these areas. You mentioned earlier vulnerability, another one of her key areas. But in many different books, many different places, she talks about some of these empathy misses. And because
Mhm.
empathy is a tool of compassion, when we misuse empathy, that it's the same as a compassion failure. And one of them, there are several of them. The first one she talks about is sympathy or pity. And that is, I feel sorry for you,
Mm.
as
Mhm.
opposed to, wow, I can see how that hurts. I get it. Without going to the extreme of saying, oh, I understand exactly what you're feeling.
Mhm.
Because we don't. We're not
Right.
that person, even if we've gone through it. But to acknowledge, I can understand that this hurts.
Mhm.
That's different from the sympathy. Oh, I feel so sorry for you.
Right.
An- another miss would be judgment, and often this is nonverbal. I mean, we try not to mock other people, but when they reveal something, you know, our eyebrows go up or we gasp. That facial expression, we can convey judgment, and that is a compassion miss.
Right.
Or the disappointment, and especially as a leader, when somebody comes to you owning a failure or
Mhm.
a miss, we can respond with, oh man, that really let me down. Here's how that's going to hurt. They already know.
Right.
They're already disappointed in themselves. So to express that disappointment would be a miss of compassion. To blame them, obviously, but even to blame somebody else.
Right.
Say, oh, well, this
Right.
is, yeah, well, if that hadn't happened, if it's so and so over in, I won't name another department, but so often to call another department, oh, it's them.
Right.
And when they're feeling the struggle, that's a miss. Or
Mhm.
or to minimize or avoid it. Oh, it's no big deal. The toxic positivity of you've probably seen the meme of the cartoon dog in the burning building. It just says,
Mhm.
"This is fine," um, or you know what? This never happened. It's just gonna go away. It's just between us. That misses that opportunity to share the human experience with them, or to compare or compete. Oh, you think that's bad? Wait till you hear what I did when I was in your shoes. That's
Right.
nothing. Or any response that begins with, well, at least you didn't this. At least that didn't happen. At least you didn't experience this. That competition, trying to make them feel better, it's not the same as compassion. Or disbelief,
Mhm.
especially in an area where they may have taken a bold stand. We're talking about compassion and respect for diverse opinions. And when somebody is being mistreated and somebody takes a bold stand for justice and for right, and things don't go well, or they're the whistleblower and things start to pile in around them, um, one miss would be, wow, I can't believe you did that.
Right.
As opposed to, wow, that must have been really hard. That was such a brave thing to do.
Right.
And then the last miss that Brene Brown talks about is just giving advice, problem solving. Oh, well, what you need to do is, or, yeah, well, have you tried? Or anything that we do to try to fix it. And
Right.
I've
Right.
seen all of these. I have done all of these. But those are the things that I've seen and done that Brene Brown talks about when we try to show compassion, but we miss.
Right. Great examples. Great examples. So, how about the people that really are the extreme lack of compassion and do all the things wrong and are aggressive. How I this leads to kind of how do you get into these companies to help? I have this one memory. Everything you're saying, it's like a checkbox. A friend of mine worked at a company that she was way overqualified for, but that's a whole long story. And she had the most aggressive boss.
Mm.
And she literally had to deal with legal. That's how aggressive she was. And she did everything wrong. Eventually, my friend was able to relocate to within the company to another department, but it took 3 years of lack of compassion and
Mm.
aggression. So how do you get into the right how do you meet that right person in an organization that will be able to address those type of leaders that are so toxic?
It really depends on where that toxic leader is in the organization, but generally it's going to be either somebody up the reporting chain from them or somebody in the HR department. But they have to see enough redeeming qualities where the person is worth investing in.
Right.
And many times, especially in an engineering organization, we'll call them the toxic genius or the brilliant
Uh-huh.
jerk, different phrases for that. But generally speaking, people aren't intentionally discompassionate or uncompassionate or whatever the opposite word is. They don't they're not knowingly and deliberately that way. Most people genuinely want the organization to succeed, and they honestly believe that what they're actually doing is showing backbone.
Mhm.
Somebody around here needs to have a spine,
Right.
and people aren't going to like it, but I'm going to be the person who has that spine, because if nobody does, then this our department's going to fail or our company's going to fail. So they tend to believe that they're doing it for a positive reason. If if they're not truly narcissistic, self-centered, and pathological, which I'm not qualified to evaluate, but as long as that's not the kind of person they are, then they generally have a valuable contribution that they really want the organization to succeed. And sometimes it's just about helping them to see that there are alternatives, to understand what compassion looks like and the value of it, and then help them find the path to the goals that they're trying to achieve that still can express compassion.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like what you said, because I certainly can relate to that 100%. When you deal with HR or the higher ups, it's are they going to invest in that individual? It's the same thing with the communication training. So many of these um, brilliant individuals that need the communication training, is the HR department or the higher ups going to make that investment? Um, I so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and it's such an important topic. And I hope everyone who watches this, whether they're on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, shares this video, because we really do need to spread this word and get into those environments. I love again, you threw out so many great phrases. The toxic genius. I like that. I kind of like that better than the brilliant jerk. I like the toxic genius. Uh, and oh my God, thank you so much. I just also want to say that Sinan just thanked for your suggestions and commented that they've learned a lot. And I'm sure, like I said, there's many others watching that aren't giving us comments yet. But for all of those that watch this on the recording, feel free to ask questions and post your comments, because this is live forever. Just in wrapping up, and this has been such a pleasure. If you have watched my videos, you know that I've talked about leadership and that it is important that leaders lead with authenticity, empathy, and now you have such great insights into the importance of compassion. You will get links, certainly on the YouTube description, to Steve's information. So you can get that. You will also have access to my 10 tips to communicate with clarity and confidence. And again, shameless plug, help my YouTube channel get to 100K. We are at 98,000 at the moment of recording. So subscribe. And Steve, I just loved collaborating. The minute I met you, I knew I wanted to, because we both want to help these tech geniuses, not toxic geniuses, these tech geniuses, to succeed in their careers. Any last words that you'd like to share?
I just echo, I'm excited about the role that you're playing too, because just like on the emotional side, on the skills side, the ability to communicate with clarity, I've been in conversation with somebody who recognizes that the reason they're not able to move is because the lack of communication skills, hard to be understood, accent issues, communication. I remember reading or hearing in the Manager Tools podcast, where I cut my teeth, communication is what the listener does. So if the listener can't get what you're saying, you have not communicated. And so to have you in that position to help people to conquer those challenges, it's going to be a great help. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And, we'll live forever together.
Thank you so much, Jayne.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Steve. And let's just be sure to spread compassion in the workplace. Thank you for that really important message.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.